Hello, my name is Daisy, and I died 6 months ago. At least, that's what my sister told everyone. They held a funeral, collected the insurance money, and smiled into cameras like I'd been a lovely little chapter. Closed. But I wasn't dead. I was watching. From the cold water I was pushed into by the same sister who gave a speech at my funeral, and the man who helped her. He kissed my forehead before they threw me overboard. Ever wondered what it feels like to come back from your own death, only to see your family celebrating? Yeah, me too. The knock came just after I started believing I was finally safe. I had been standing on the small balcony of our stateroom, gripping a half-full glass of Pinot like it was the last anchor I had. The ocean hummed gently under the ship, a soft lullaby, the kind that makes you think, maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe it really is possible to reset. That was the whole point of this cruise, after all. Family bonding, Vera had called it, her voice syrupy, a chance to rebuild what we lost. But that phrase, rebuild what we lost? I didn't remember Vera ever losing anything. I remembered losing a childhood, a voice, a name that meant anything outside of being someone's little sister. I'd booked the cruise out of Charleston myself, paid for most of it too, said it was my birthday present to us. Vera called it extravagant but still smiled in all the photos. Cillian had packed 2 books he never opened and kept checking his phone, said work was following him onto the sea. I let it go. I was tired of being the one who always asked the questions. But that dinner should have been a red flag so bright it burned. The ballroom had shimmered that night. Waiters moved like ghosts, music soft, almost like it was afraid to interrupt the illusion. Vera stood and made a toast. To Daisy, she said, to the one who always sees the best in others. You deserve to be remembered. I laughed awkwardly. I'm not dying, Vera. She smiled at me, that tight-lipped kind of smile she'd perfected since we were kids. Of course not, she said, clinking her glass against mine. Cillian leaned over and whispered, she means legacy, making a mark. But later, in the quiet of our room, that word remembered wouldn't leave me alone. I turned when the knock came. The sound was soft, 3 little taps, like someone trying not to be heard. When I opened the door, Cillian was standing there, shirt slightly wrinkled, hair wet from a shower. He smiled in that casual, practiced way of his. You up for some air? He asked. It's our last night out here. I nodded and slipped on my sweater. We didn't speak much as we walked the deck. The sky was clear, stars scattered like forgotten confetti. He leaned on the railing, watching the waves. I stood a few feet away. You know, he said finally, you've always been the soft one in your family. I looked over. Is that a bad thing? He shrugged. Not bad, just unprepared. We watched the sea for a while longer. Then he turned and kissed my forehead, quick, mechanical. I'm heading in, he said. You staying out? I'll be in soon. He walked off, and I stayed, fingers curled tight around the metal railing. Something about that moment, it felt final, like I'd been filed away. The next morning, we docked. That's when I saw it. An email forwarded by Jenna, a friend from work. The subject line, in loving memory of Daisy Broderick. I opened it on instinct. Inside was a message from Cillian, addressed to my coworkers, my friends, even my old professor from community college. His words made my stomach flip. Daisy was the most generous soul, he wrote. She gave everything, expected nothing, and left this world better than she found it. I was the luckiest man to love her. I stared at it. We were still on the ship. I hadn't even packed my suitcase. Jenna's message followed. I didn't want to forward this. I didn't know how to respond. I'm so sorry. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I read the email again and again, each word sticking like thorns. Left this world, expected nothing, and then, the funeral will be private, as per her family's wishes, my family's wishes. The water outside the window glittered like it had secrets. I pressed the phone to my chest, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and clarity. I'd always wondered what it would take to see people's true selves. Apparently, dying did the trick. I stayed silent that evening, didn't ask questions, didn't confront anyone. I just watched. Watched Cillian hand his suitcase to the porter, watched Vera snap one last selfie at the port, watched the two of them pretend I wasn't watching. And later that night, I stood on the balcony again. Same sweater, same sea. This time, no glass in hand. Just a question burning in my head. If I disappeared, would anyone really look? It wasn't fear that crept in then. It was something colder, something clearer. I went to bed, pulled the covers over me, and stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't planning an escape. I didn't have to. They were already doing it for me. The knock came just after I started believing I was finally safe. I opened the door without thinking, expecting maybe a steward or a staff reminder about checkout. Instead, there stood Cillian, clean-shaven, polished, a little too smooth for that hour of the night. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Couldn't sleep," he said, tilting his head toward the hallway. "Thought you might want to take one more walk before we dock." I glanced over his shoulder. The corridor behind him was empty, too quiet for a cruise still technically partying. "Sure," I said, grabbing a light cardigan. We walked side by side in silence, the ship humming beneath our feet. His hand brushed mine once, then quickly withdrew. He looked out toward the water like it held all the answers. That same Atlantic I'd watched all week, wondering if I had finally done something right bringing this family together. When we reached the top deck, it was nearly deserted. A few leftover champagne flutes clinked on a cart. The ocean wind was gentler than I expected, considering what it was about to carry. He leaned on the rail, posture easy, as if we were just another couple enjoying the stars. I stood back, watching the lines of tension around his mouth. "You've been quiet tonight," I said, keeping my tone light. He shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" He looked over, his smile returning. How endings always feel more honest than beginnings. Before I could ask what the hell that meant, another voice joined us. "Romantic out here, huh?" Vera. I hadn't even heard her approach. She was holding a glass of wine, barefoot, her shawl trailing off one shoulder like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. I noticed her wedding ring was back on. For appearances? For guilt? She walked to my side, brushing my arm slightly. "I always loved this view," she said, staring straight ahead. "It's good to close old chapters on calm seas." That line, it scraped something raw inside me. I suddenly felt outnumbered, like this wasn't just an impromptu stroll. Vera turned to me. "We should take a photo," she said softly. "Just you, against the night." I hesitated. "What for?" "For memories," she smiled. "You'll want to remember this night." Cillian pulled out his phone. Vera stepped behind me to adjust my hair like she used to when we were kids. Too rough, too quick. I laughed nervously and leaned toward the rail. I didn't hear her step closer, but I felt the shift in air. Her hands hit my back, firm, final. There was no scream, just wind and silence and the sky snapping sideways. My body twisted, weightless for a breath. I saw stars above and white foam below, spinning, then black. Everything went soundless, no splash, just cold, freezing, cutting. I opened my eyes underwater, salt burning, limbs flailing like they didn't belong to me. I didn't know which way was up. I kicked hard, lungs shrinking, until I saw shimmer, moonlight rippling through. My chest screamed for air. I broke the surface, coughing, gasping. The ship was already pulling away. They didn't look back. I treaded water for what felt like a lifetime. Every part of me ached. Every second I spent floating was another second they probably high-fived their plan into motion. Birthday trip, loving sister, accidental tragedy. I tried yelling once. Nothing answered but the tide. That's when I remembered something. My mother's voice from a night long ago when I cried about losing at school and Vera winning some science fair prize she didn't deserve. "You don't have to be like them," she had whispered, brushing my hair. "Just stay kind." I laughed in the water, hollow, bitter. Even kindness can be used against you. Hours passed. The horizon shifted colors. Eventually, a soft glow appeared. Faint, moving toward me. A fishing boat. I waved weakly, slapping water. A man's voice shouted. 2 men pulled me up. My knees buckled on the deck. Someone wrapped a jacket around me. I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel anything. They asked questions. I didn't answer. I just stared at the sea. They wanted me gone. So I'll disappear. For now. They erased me from the world. Now I'd erase the lies they built on my name. The fishing boat dropped me off just before dawn near a sleepy inlet town outside Savannah. The older man who steered it had eyes like tired sand. He didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a jacket and said, "God must have plans for you. Folks don't survive that kind of fall." He pointed me toward a diner with warm lights and a sign flickering, "Open." I thanked him, my voice cracked like old paper. The first person I spoke to since I fell. Inside, I sipped weak coffee and forced down a dry biscuit while the waitress stared at me. Not unkindly, more like she was trying to figure out if I was running to something or from everything. "I don't have money," I finally said, "but I need help." She nodded toward the corner booth. "Sheriff comes in around 6. You'll want to talk to him." At 6:07, he walked in. White hair, heavy boots, coffee before conversation. When I approached, his eyes scanned my face, the borrowed clothes, the bruises still blooming on my arms. "Name?" he asked. I hesitated. "Daisy Broderick." He frowned, flipped open his notepad. "ID? I don't have one. Phone? No." He sighed, motioned for me to sit across from him. "You in trouble?" "Yes," I said, "but not how you think." An hour later, I was at the station. I let them scan my prints, because what choice did I have? The deputy's face twisted when the screen pinged. He looked back at me like I was a riddle wrapped in grief. "This says, you're dead." I didn't flinch, just whispered, "That's what they wanted." He stepped out, came back with another officer. They asked if I'd like them to call next of kin. I laughed, not out of humor, but because the phrase was suddenly obscene. "No," I said, "please don't call anyone." Their eyes softened a little, confused, but I could tell some part of them didn't want to be the ones to unpack this mess. They transferred me to the hospital for observation. Just to be safe, they said. I think they meant just to be clear of it. The nurse was kind until the insurance form kicked back with a red flag. "Looks like this ID was associated with a settled claim," she mumbled, adjusting her glasses. "What kind of claim?" She looked up. "Life insurance. You sure you gave the right name?" I met her gaze. "I didn't die. Someone else made sure it looked like I did." She blinked slowly, unsure if I was a con artist or something more complicated. She stepped out without another word. Lying in that hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling tiles and wondered if I still had the right to want anything. A name, a home, a fight. But even ghosts remember phone numbers. Nicole, my mother's friend, a woman who'd whispered at her funeral that I reminded her of someone who didn't give up. I borrowed the nurse's phone when she stepped out again. My hands were trembling so badly I had to tap the numbers twice. She answered on the third ring. "This is Nicole," came the same calm, steel-lined voice I remembered from 10 years ago. "It's Daisy," I said. Silence. Then, "Tell me where you are." Now, later that week, I made my way back to Charleston. Nicole had arranged for a friend to drive me. No questions asked. She said she'd meet me soon, but that there was something I needed to do first, for myself. I knew what she meant. I went to my father's house, same brick porch, same hedge he trimmed with military precision. It looked exactly like the childhood I remembered, minus the warmth. He opened the door slower than I expected. Older, more tired. At first, he just stared at me. Then he stepped back without saying a word, letting me in. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old mail. I walked through the hallway, drawn toward the picture wall, where our family photos had always hung like some sacred timeline. There it was, the newest edition. A photo from a month ago. Vera in black, Cillian beside her, holding a framed image of me. It was the same headshot I'd once used for work, cropped in a soft oval, the kind people use for obituaries. Below that, a full family portrait, taken after the funeral. My father, Vera, Cillian, a few cousins, but not me. Even the angle of the picture made it obvious someone had been removed. I turned to him, the weight of that missing space pressing on my chest. "You took me out of the picture." He didn't meet my eyes. It was painful, seeing you there, knowing what happened. I almost asked, "What do you mean, what happened?" But I already knew. He believed them, believed Vera, believed Cillian, and now he couldn't look me in the eye without seeing whatever version of me they sold him. "I didn't know what to believe," he said. "Vera said." Vera lied. His lips tightened. He looked smaller than I remembered. The man who once taught me to ride a bike now seemed unsure of his own steps. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I simply said, "You erased me because it was easier than asking hard questions." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I walked out before he could say anything else. Some doors don't need slamming. They shut themselves with the weight of what was lost. Outside, I didn't look back. I had no home here, no name, no safety. But I had breath, and I had time. And now, I had a reason. I didn't want to be remembered. I wanted to be feared, just enough. After I left my father's house, I stayed with Nicole. She lived in a modest home near Ashley River, quiet, shaded by oaks. Her guest room had peeling wallpaper and a nightstand with a working rotary phone. I hadn't seen one of those in decades, but something about the click of its dial felt grounding, real. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't need to. Nicole had known my mother longer than I'd been alive. She knew how deep silence could run in a family like mine. On the second morning, over toast and black coffee, she slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your records," she said. As much as I could get through legal back channels. Inside were copies, driver's license, birth certificate, tax filings, even a high school yearbook photo. I hadn't seen that face in so long. Rounder cheeks, straighter teeth, brighter eyes. I barely recognized her. But tucked inside was something else, a printout of a life insurance policy dated 6 months before the cruise. Policyholder, Daisy M. Broderick. Beneficiary, Cillian Broderick. Witness, Vera S. Alcott. Nicole didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I stared at the paper for a long time. The signatures looked authentic because they were mine. I remembered that day, actually. Vera had called it a wedding gift, a folder with financial planning documents. She said, "Let's get you two secured for life." Cillian had made a joke about how lucky he was to have someone who actually read the fine print. I laughed. Then I signed. What I didn't realize until now was I'd signed the contract for my own erasure. Nicole cleared her throat gently. "You want to dig deeper?" "I want everything," I said. "Emails, transactions, timelines. I want to know when they started this." It took her 2 days. By then, I'd already moved into a small Airbnb under an alias, paid in cash. I spent most of the time walking the edges of the city, watching the world that still believed I was dead. On the 3rd day, Nicole handed me a thumb drive. "Start here." Inside were archived emails, Cillian's company account, back when he worked for an estate planning firm. She'd traced a few threads between him and Vera, the earliest dated back to 5 weeks before our wedding. From Vera, "Let's make this official after the papers are through." From Cillian, "She'll sign anything if it comes from me." I didn't cry. I printed them instead, slipped them into a clean folder, labeled it with a single word, proof. Later that night, I lay in bed and let the memories come. Our wedding day, the pale blue sky, Vera's too long speech that made more people laugh than cry. And then afterward, back in the suite, Cillian handed me an envelope. "Sign these," he said, "just confirming our joint stuff. My lawyer prepped it earlier." I'd been half-dressed, laughing, high on champagne. "You want me to do paperwork now?" "Come on," he grinned. "Let's make this marriage official." I'd rolled my eyes and signed. No wonder he'd framed the wedding photo so carefully. The smile in that picture wasn't love, it was closure on a contract. The next morning, Nicole drove us to a bank just outside downtown. She had posed as my financial advisor. We both knew my name wouldn't pull up normally in their system anymore. She chatted up the clerk, flashed a fake badge from the Consumer Trust Department, said we needed to verify an account linked to a life insurance deposit made on July 3rd. The clerk returned, flustered, and said, "It was paid out 3 days before the reported accident." I felt my stomach turn. They hadn't waited for me to die. They'd pulled the trigger assuming they were already clear. In the car, Nicole didn't speak. She didn't need to. I stared at the dashboard clock, watching the minutes tick by like a metronome of rage. That night, I stayed up, writing. I composed a short letter. "Vera, enclosed is a copy of the payout form. Your signature is lovely, mine's better. Next time, forge less convincingly. I'm not your asset anymore. No name, no return address, just a white envelope addressed to her spa's headquarters." The next morning, I walked it to a mailbox myself. I stood there a moment after dropping it in, letting the sound of it landing settle into my chest like the click of a locked door. She might not panic right away, but she would pause. That was enough for now. And the first time I saw the necklace, I nearly threw up right there on the ballroom floor. It was a week after I'd sent Vera that envelope, the one with the forged student loan paperwork and the simple note, "I may have been dead, but your debt wasn't." I didn't expect a response. I didn't need one. But I knew Vera. She wouldn't go quiet. She'd flinch, then double down. That's how she played every hand growing up. Smile, stall, strike harder. Nicole and I had decided I'd start rebuilding what was mine, legally, publicly, quietly. The best way to make them sweat was to show up in places they thought were safe. That's how I ended up at the Charleston Heritage fundraiser. It was hosted at the Magnolia Grand, a hotel that practically reeked of inherited wealth and curated smiles. Vera was on the sponsor list, of course. Cillian, too, listed as an investment advisor. I arrived alone, simple black dress, hair swept up, no name tag, no introduction. I wasn't there to mingle. I was there to watch. I moved along the back wall, weaving between white linens and half-sipped wine glasses. That's when I saw them. Center of the room, Vera holding court like she owned the air people breathed. Cillian stood beside her, too polished, his hand resting lightly on the waist of a woman I didn't recognize. The woman was maybe 10 years younger than me, blonde in that effortless way Vera always preferred for her assistants. Or her understudies, but it wasn't her face that stopped me cold. It was the necklace. Gold, dainty, a small oval pendant with a pale blue gem in the middle. It used to be mine. Vera gave it to me when I was 17, a rare, oddly sentimental moment. She'd come into my room the night before I left for college and laid it on my desk. "This was Mom's. You're the last one who actually reminded her of herself." I'd worn it every day that year. The woman wearing it now had no clue what it meant. But Vera did, and so did Cillian. That necklace wasn't an accessory. It was a warning. I felt my throat tighten. My fingers dug into the small clutch bag I was carrying. I moved closer, casually enough not to draw attention. My heels didn't echo. I was good at being quiet now. They turned as I approached. Cillian's eyes landed on me, and I saw it. The flicker, recognition trying to fight disbelief. He recovered fast, offering a smile. "Evening," he said, a little too smooth. "Enjoying the event?" I looked past him to the woman. "That necklace," I said softly. "It's lovely." She touched it with her fingers, smiling. "It was a gift." "From her?" I nodded toward Vera. The woman nodded. "She said it had meaning." I smiled politely. "It does. Just not for her." Vera's face didn't move, but her eyes, those gave her away, wide, frozen, calculating. I leaned closer. "If you want to keep smiling in public," I murmured, "I suggest you stop cashing things that don't belong to you." And then I walked away. I didn't wait to see their reactions. I didn't need to. I'd planted the seed, and that was enough. The air behind me felt different, tense, brittle, like a storm had just whispered through a quiet town. Outside, I exhaled. My heart pounded against my ribs, but it wasn't fear. It was power. By the end of that week, I had a new mailing address. A tiny apartment on the edge of Columbia. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, mine. Nicole helped me file the name change paperwork through the state. Not too dramatic, just reclaiming my maiden name, my real name, Daisy Ann Mercer. I opened a bank account, registered for a state ID, filed a restraining order under seal. Step by step, I built a new life on top of the old one they tried to bury. And at night, I made notes, diagrams, printed every document Nicole dug up. They thought they taught me how to disappear. What they really taught me was how to move through walls without anyone noticing. And I knew the moment that recording started playing, someone else would burn before I did. But before that night, before the dinner, before the reveal, I had to watch them pretend. It was another fundraiser, Vera's favorite type of stage. This one for a historic preservation society she never actually volunteered for. But her name was printed on every flyer, next to Cillian's, as Distinguished Community Leaders. It was all part of their theater. I arrived 30 minutes before the speeches were set to begin. The ballroom glowed with chandelier light, the kind that made everyone look just a little more polished than they were. I moved slowly along the back edge, close to the curtains, blending into the white-gloved servers and murmuring caterers. They didn't see me come in. That was the point. Cillian was wearing the same black tux he'd worn at our wedding. Vera looked like money incarnate, gold dress, hair in a flawless updo, too perfect lipstick. It took everything in me not to laugh at how obvious it was. They were performing again. Only this time, I was the audience they didn't know they had. The woman on Cillian's arm that evening wasn't the blonde from last time. She was brunette, maybe early 30s, with the kind of posture that said she knew how to play this game, but she didn't matter. What mattered was what hung around her neck. That necklace, the blue pendant, the inscription, "No one understands you like your sister." When Vera had handed it to me years ago, she'd said it was a sign we'd turned a page, that all the fights and rivalry were behind us. I believed her. Fool that I was. Now here it was again, draped across someone else's collarbone, on someone who probably didn't know the stone was fake, and the sentiment worse. I moved in, slow and steady, as if drawn by the music alone. They noticed me this time. Cillian turned, and I saw it again. That hesitation, like his brain didn't quite accept what his eyes were telling him. The woman holding his arm smiled warmly. "That necklace," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "It looks antique." She touched it instinctively, like a reflex. "It was a gift from a close friend." Vera's smile didn't move. Her eyes locked on mine, unreadable. I nodded slowly. Some gifts carry stories, some carry debts. I'd be careful near open water. No one laughed. Cillian's jaw shifted. Vera's fingers tightened on her wine glass. I turned and walked away. I didn't need a scene. I didn't need an audience. I'd left the message. I wanted them thinking, not reacting. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. The envelope had no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Vera always looped her V's too tall. Inside, a folded sheet of monogrammed stationery. "You've made your point. Don't push this further. We all mourn in our own way. V." I read it once, then again, and smiled. She was worried. Good. I lit the note over my stove and dropped it into the sink. Later that afternoon, I opened the box I'd been avoiding. It held what was left of my old life: photos, letters, birthday cards, and one small album of our mothers. Vera had offered to digitize the whole thing years ago. She scanned and saved everything, except for the pages with me in them. I burned most of it that night, not in some dramatic ritual, just slowly, page by page, in the fireplace of my rented apartment. I kept only one picture, me and Mom. I was 5. She was brushing my hair on the front porch. We weren't looking at the camera. We didn't need to. That photo went into my wallet. The rest turned to ash. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was preparing. The truth was, they didn't bury me in the ocean. They buried me in lies. Now, it was their turn to drown. And then came the day she stood in cuffs, and all I did was watch. But it didn't start that way. It started quietly, methodically, like all things I'd learned to do since coming back. 3 weeks before Vera's arrest, I had walked into a private fundraising dinner under the name Delia M. Mercer, a donor's guest, with just enough fake polish and just enough borrowed charm to get a seat near the back. Hair dyed darker, clothes conservative, not too plain, not too flashy. I didn't want anyone noticing me for the wrong reasons. It was being hosted at the Seabrook Club, an old money enclave just outside Charleston, the kind of place with fresh-cut orchids on every table and staff trained not to speak unless spoken to. Vera was scheduled to speak about legacy giving, a phrase that tasted like rust in my mouth now. Nicole had helped secure the reservation. I'd posed as a minor foundation advisor, said I was vetting speakers for an upcoming event in Charlotte. The story held up. Money always made people nod. I didn't go there just to listen. Tucked in the small pocket of my apron was my phone, recording quietly. A directional mic clipped to the inside seam. I'd tested the placement for days, practiced how I'd lean in when I'd refill water, how close I could get without drawing attention. When Vera arrived, she was radiant in the way only liars can be. Crisp navy suit, pearls that didn't catch the light too much, and a voice like honey over gravel. I waited. I served. I stood behind her chair while donors whispered praise, money promises, campaign suggestions. And then, after her second glass of wine, she leaned back in her seat and said the thing I'd prayed for and feared I'd hear. She was too soft, Vera laughed, swirling her drink. Too stupid to swim in this world. Someone had to push her. The words floated out so casually. A few people chuckled. One woman made a face, unsure if it was a joke. Vera didn't clarify. She just sipped and turned to talk to the man beside her. That was all I needed. 2 days later, Nicole called. She had tracked down a video posted by a tourist from the cruise ship. It hadn't gone viral, just buried in a long vlog about ocean views and food. But near the 6-minute mark, there it was. A grainy clip of 2 women standing near the ship's rail. One figure stepped behind the other. A sudden shift. Then just open water. We watched it in silence. I didn't breathe until Nicole whispered, "This is it." We layered the audio from Vera's confession over the video, matched the timing, adjusted levels. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to feel real. And then we posted it. Anonymous. We didn't add hashtags, didn't send it to press. We just let it sit, quiet and hungry, waiting for the internet to do what it does best. Within 48 hours, the views crossed 10,000, then 100,000. Within a week, Vera's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Comments poured in. She murdered her sister and showed up at the funeral in designer heels. Murderer in Chanel. Tell me again how you fell off a boat, Daisy? Vera's publicist released a statement calling it malicious editing and an attack on a grieving family. Cillian was notably absent from any defense. I received a text the night after the video hit 500,000 views. Unknown number. Whatever you think you've won, it won't last. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I opened my email and forwarded the original uncut audio file to my attorney. No subject, just a single sentence in the body. It doesn't need to last, it just needs to hit. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I was already wide awake. And still, the only voice I truly needed to hear was hers, the one I'd never hear again. It was late October. Charleston's morning air had turned crisp, the kind that clung to your coat and whispered fall into your bones. I arrived early at the downtown convention center, walking in through the loading dock entrance as part of the audio-visual staff. That's how I got in. They wouldn't have let Daisy Broderick in through the front. Not after what Vera had said about her. Not after what Cillian hadn't said at all. I wore a simple blazer, hair pinned back, no makeup, blended in like I'd always been trained to do, by them. The spa conference had drawn a decent crowd. Vera was scheduled to give the keynote on resilience and sisterhood. I didn't laugh when I saw the program, just highlighted it with a red pen and waited. I took a seat in the shadows along the back wall. The room buzzed. Smells of coffee and overly sweet pastries filled the air. Attendees sipped and nodded along to a moderator's intro before Vera took the stage, framed by digital slides of smiling women and ocean retreats. She began smoothly, as always. "I know what it means to fall and rise again," she said, "to rebuild not just your brand, but your heart." I almost choked on the word heart. At the 5-minute mark, the screens behind her flickered. Twice, people looked around. She faltered, just for a second, then continued. The next slide loaded, then glitch again. But this time, it didn't reload. The screen darkened completely. Then it started. The tourist video. First, the grainy footage of the cruise ship deck. Two figures, one in white, one in navy, one step, one shove, a body disappearing into the Atlantic. Gasps. And then, overlaid perfectly in sync, Vera's drunken voice from the dinner recording. She was too soft, too stupid to swim in this world. Someone had to push her. Silence hit the room like a slap. Chairs creaked. Someone dropped their coffee. Vera stood frozen at the podium. A woman in the third row raised her phone and hit record. More followed. Whispers swelled into a hum. I stood slowly, not dramatic, just tall. Her eyes found mine. It was the first time she saw me since the cruise. Her jaw clenched, and I saw something flicker behind her expression. Panic or recognition, maybe both. And then, sirens outside. The side doors opened, and two officers entered, crisp and deliberate. "Vera Seraphine Alcott," one said, loud and clear. "You are under arrest for fraud, falsifying federal documents, and suspicion of attempted murder." She didn't resist, didn't flinch. She turned slowly and placed her wrists behind her, allowing the cuffs like they were a bracelet she'd been expecting to wear. As they led her past the crowd, past the reporters and shocked attendees, she paused only once, right in front of me. "You're not the only one who knows how to survive," she said, almost like a benediction. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I waited until the room cleared out, some left in anger, others in disbelief, a few in tears. When the lights dimmed and all that remained were the hum of the projector fans and one news crew packing up cables, I walked to the podium. I stood where she had stood, gripped the edge of the lectern, looked out at empty chairs that moments ago had held people who applauded her. Then I leaned into the mic and said, "Not all survivors need applause. Some just need a name back." No one clapped. And that was fine. It wasn't for them. Nicole helped file everything. The insurance payout was frozen. The civil suit moved forward. My name was legally reinstated within 3 weeks. A formal statement was issued from the insurer, acknowledging their error and clearing me of any association with the false claim. Press reached out. News crews, talk show producers, everyone wanted the exclusive. I declined. I let the footage speak, let Vera's words bury her like they tried to bury me. And Cillian? He disappeared before the police ever knocked. No forwarding address, no activity on his accounts. Just gone, like a shadow slipping off a wall when the lights come on. Maybe that was his gift, vanishing before consequences caught up. A month later, I visited the county jail. I didn't go to gloat. I didn't even stay long. She looked different. Jumpsuit, no makeup, hair flat. But her smirk hadn't changed. "You're stronger now," she said through the glass. "You're welcome." I stood there a moment longer, then hung up the receiver and walked away. Not because I forgave her, but because I no longer needed to understand her. She took my life. I turned it into a legacy. The day after I walked out of the jailhouse without looking back, I found myself standing in my mother's old bedroom, sunlight slipping through the curtains just like it used to when I was a child. The house had been untouched for years. Nicole had the keys, kept it clean, but no one lived there since Mom passed. I was searching for nothing in particular when I saw it. The jewelry box. It was tucked inside the bottom dresser drawer, exactly where I'd remembered hiding my allowance money as a kid. Wooden, slightly chipped, the clasp still stiff. Inside, next to a faded locket and a few of Mom's rings, was a cassette tape. On the label, in her handwriting, "For Daisy." I stared at it for a while. The tape felt warm in my hand, though I knew that wasn't possible. I didn't even have a player, Not until Nicole drove back that afternoon and rummaged through her attic until she found an old portable recorder. We sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. No traffic, no television, no hum of anything modern. Just the two of us, and Mom's voice when I hit play. "Hi, baby," it began. Soft. Certain. "If you're hearing this, something's changed. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe you're lost. Or maybe you're just standing at a crossroads and don't know which way to go." I felt my eyes sting. Don't let this world decide who you are, sweetheart. Don't let someone else write your story or steal your name. You're not the one who disappears. You're the one who remembers. Leave something behind that says, "I was here." I closed my eyes and let the silence fill the room once the tape clicked off. Later that week, Nicole traced a trust account opened 2 decades ago under my birth name. A modest sum, nothing that would change the world. But enough to start something. That's how the Quiet Sister Project began. A foundation built for women like me, those erased by family systems, dismissed by silence, buried under the weight of others' legacies. We launched support groups, legal advocacy partnerships, and eventually, small weekend retreats. I didn't put my face on it. There were no interviews, no podcasts, no book deals, just quiet work and a name that mattered again. Daisy Mercer. No hyphen, no husband's name, no sister's shadow. As for them, Vera was sentenced to 8 years. Parole might shave it down to 5. She made one statement during the trial: "I did what I had to do." Her attorney called it a misguided business decision. Cillian vanished. There's a federal warrant, but no one's seen him. His accounts are frozen, his car abandoned in Georgia. Occasionally, I'll get a call from some agency or reporter asking if I've heard from him. I always say the same thing. I don't chase ghosts anymore. I moved into a small house near Edisto Beach. It's nothing like the home I grew up in. And that's the point. This one's filled with light. Real light. No family portraits in the hallway. Just one picture in my office. Me and Mom on the swing out front, her arm around me, my smile real. Some mornings, I sit there with a mug of coffee and reread the mission statement of the foundation. I ask myself, quietly, if Mom would have been proud. And then I remember, she always was. She just didn't get the chance to say it out loud. Not all survivors need applause. Some of us just need the space to build something honest, something that can't be bought, edited, or insured. They tried to write me out, not just out of the will or the pictures or the documents, but out of memory, out of value, out of being someone worth fighting for. But here's the thing about stories. They don't stop at betrayal. They grow beyond it. I thought surviving meant proving I was still breathing, but it meant more than that. It meant finding my own voice and using it to lift others like me. She pushed me into the sea, but I came back not to punish. I came back to build. They wrote me out of the story. So I wrote a new one, stronger, louder, mine. Some stories aren't just about survival. They're about taking back what was stolen, piece by piece. Daisy didn't come back for revenge. She came back to rebuild. And maybe that's the real power, not in punishing the people who broke you, but in refusing to let them define your ending. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More true life-inspired stories are coming, stories about strength, betrayal, and the quiet fight to be seen.